The rain struck the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackwood Tower with relentless force, turning the glittering skyline into a blur of silver and gray. 48 floors above downtown Chicago, the storm looked small compared to the one unfolding inside the executive boardroom. Every director had already been dismissed. Every assistant had been ordered out. The only sounds remaining were the distant rumble of thunder and the slow ticking of a handcrafted Swiss clock mounted on the walnut-paneled wall. Damien Blackwood stood silently beside the window, one hand tucked into the pocket of his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. At 36, he had transformed Blackwood Global Holdings from a struggling logistics company into one of America's most powerful corporate empires. His businesses controlled shipping terminals, luxury hotels, commercial real estate, financial investment firms, and cutting-edge technology companies across 3 continents. Financial magazines called him a visionary. His competitors called him ruthless. Inside his company, employees simply called him Mr. Blackwood, because nobody dared become familiar with a man whose decisions could create fortunes or destroy careers before lunchtime. Without turning around, Damien spoke in a calm voice that somehow carried more weight than a shout. "Tell me again how $5.2 million disappeared." Across the polished conference table, Richard Collins felt his throat tighten. For nearly 20 years he had served as chief financial officer, earning Damien's confidence through flawless reports and impressive quarterly profits. Today every accomplishment meant nothing. A thick audit file rested open in front of him, every page exposing another layer of deception. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Richard whispered. "The investments failed." Damien finally faced him. Dark, unreadable eyes settled on the older man, without the slightest trace of sympathy. "You created 4 shell corporations." He flipped another page. "You transferred company funds through offshore accounts." Another page. "You forged board approvals." Another. "And you expected my internal audit division to miss it." Richard's hands shook violently. "I can explain. I already understand." Damien slowly closed the folder. "You stole from me." Silence swallowed the room. Outside, lightning illuminated the Chicago skyline before darkness reclaimed it. "I've contacted federal attorneys," Damien continued evenly. "They'll wait 48 hours before filing charges." Richard's face turned ghostly white. "Please." "You have exactly 2 choices." Damien stepped closer. "Return every dollar." He paused. "Or spend the rest of your life watching everything you've built disappear." Richard collapsed into the leather chair, covering his face with trembling hands. Bankruptcy would be immediate. Criminal charges would follow. His reputation, his wealth, his freedom, everything would vanish. Then desperation gave birth to an unforgivable idea. There may be another solution." Damien's expression never changed. "I'm listening." "My daughter." For the first time during the entire meeting, Damien frowned. "You have one." Richard nodded weakly. "Emma." "I've never heard you mention her." "We haven't spoken much." Damien remained silent. Richard rushed forward before courage abandoned him. "The board keeps delaying the Hartwell International merger because you're unmarried. Your grandfather's trust also requires a legal spouse before full controlling shares transfer into your name next quarter." Damien said nothing. Richard continued. "My daughter is 28. She has no connection to my business. She's respectable, no scandals. She owns a bakery." "What does that have to do with my missing money?" Richard swallowed hard. "Her mother's family established a trust years ago. Emma gains access to nearly $8 million on her next birthday. If you marry her under a legally structured settlement agreement, the debt is covered. Your board gets the family image they want, and the merger proceeds without delay." The room became so quiet that Richard could hear the rain striking the glass. Damien stared at him with complete disbelief. "You are offering your own daughter as collateral." Richard lowered his eyes. "I'm offering a business solution." "No. I'm offering both of us survival." Damien walked back toward the window. He despised emotional bargaining. But facts were harder to ignore. The board had delayed the merger twice. Institutional investors wanted stability. His grandfather's trust document required marriage before transferring billions in voting shares. The timing was almost impossible. Finally, Damien spoke. "Bring her to Blackwood Tower tomorrow." Richard looked up hopefully. "If she refuses, then you lose everything." There, across Chicago, the warm scent of fresh cinnamon drifted through the tiny storefront of Sweet Haven Bakery. Emma Collins smiled as she carefully arranged warm sourdough loaves onto wooden shelves, while neighborhood customers chatted happily around small cafe tables. Unlike the polished glass towers downtown, her world was filled with flour, laughter, handwritten recipes, and familiar faces. She preferred it that way. Her father had spent years trying to mold her into someone obsessed with wealth and appearances. Instead, Emma had walked away. She built her bakery from nothing, waking before sunrise every morning to knead dough with her own hands. Her soft, curvy figure moved comfortably around the kitchen as she carried another tray from the ovens. She ignored every cruel comment she had ever heard about her body. The regular customers loved her kindness far more than perfection. Only one secret weighed upon her heart. As the bakery emptied for the afternoon lull, Emma quietly rested one hand over her abdomen beneath her flour-covered apron. 14 weeks. The tiny life growing inside her remained invisible beneath her naturally full figure. Only her doctor knew. 4 months earlier, she had attended an elegant charity masquerade after a friend begged her to accompany her. Wearing a crimson velvet gown and a jeweled mask, she had shared one unforgettable night with a mysterious stranger whose deep voice and quiet confidence still haunted her dreams. She had awakened before sunrise. He was gone. She never learned his name. She never expected to carry his child. Now she protected that secret with every heartbeat. The bell above the bakery door suddenly rang. Emma looked up, expecting another customer. Instead, her smile disappeared. Richard Collins stood in the doorway. Behind him waited 4 men in identical black suits, wearing discreet earpieces, and the unmistakable posture of elite corporate security. Her father's face looked years older than when she had last seen him. His voice cracked. "Emma, pack a bag." She slowly removed her apron. "I think you're in the wrong bakery." His eyes filled with panic. "No." He stepped forward. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The security officers quietly entered behind him, closing the door. Richard looked directly into his daughter's stunned eyes. "I've already promised you to Damien Blackwood." Emma felt the world stop turning. "You don't belong to yourself anymore." Emma stared at her father as though he had spoken a language she no longer understood. The warm scent of fresh bread suddenly felt suffocating inside the bakery she had spent years building with her own hands. Before she could demand an explanation, one of the corporate security officers stepped forward and placed a leather portfolio on the counter. Inside were legal documents bearing the unmistakable seal of Blackwood Global Holdings. Richard's trembling signature already covered several pages. Emma's eyes raced over words like collateral settlement, executive marriage agreement, and debt resolution, each sentence stealing another piece of her freedom. She looked up with tears burning behind her eyes. "You sold me." Richard couldn't meet her gaze. "I saved both of us." Emma's laugh was hollow. "No, you saved yourself." An hour later, a sleek black motorcade rolled beneath the towering glass headquarters of Blackwood Global Holdings. Employees instinctively stepped aside as Emma was escorted through polished marble halls where billion-dollar deals were made every day. Everything about the building whispered power, from the silent elevators requiring biometric access to the enormous digital wall displaying the company's worldwide operations. When the elevator doors finally opened on the executive floor, Emma found herself standing before towering walnut doors engraved with a single silver name, Damien Blackwood. Inside, Damien stood beside panoramic windows overlooking Chicago, Without turning around, he already knew she had entered. His reflection in the glass revealed a man carved from discipline rather than flesh. Expensive suit, perfect posture, eyes colder than the storm gathering beyond the skyline. When he finally faced her, Emma's heart skipped violently. That voice. Even after 4 months, she recognized its deep, controlled rhythm instantly. It was the same voice that had whispered against her ear beneath a black masquerade mask before dawn changed both of their lives forever. She froze, searching his face for recognition, but Damien looked at her as though she were another contract awaiting his signature. He slowly walked around his massive desk and stopped only inches away. "Miss Collins, I don't believe in fairy tales, romance, or destiny. I believe in contracts." He slid a fountain pen across the polished desk. "Marry me, satisfy the board, secure my merger, and your father avoids prison. Refuse." His gaze never wavered. "And by sunrise tomorrow, Richard Collins loses everything he has left." Emma instinctively pressed a trembling hand against the secret life growing beneath her sweater. The father of her unborn child had just asked her to become his wife, and he had absolutely no idea who she was. The wedding took place 3 days later beneath the soaring stained glass ceiling of one of Chicago's oldest cathedrals, closed to the public under the guise of a private corporate ceremony. Financial reporters crowded outside the iron gates while cameras captured every arriving limousine, convinced they were witnessing the marriage that would secure the largest international merger in Blackwood Global Holdings history. Emma walked down the aisle wearing an elegant ivory gown chosen by stylists she had never met, yet every step felt heavier than the last. She refused to look at her father sitting silently in the front pew. Instead, her eyes remained fixed on Damien Blackwood, the man waiting before the altar with the calm confidence of someone signing another business agreement rather than beginning a marriage. When he slipped the diamond ring onto her finger, his hand brushed hers for only a heartbeat, but the familiar warmth sent a wave of forgotten memories crashing through her. She fought to keep her expression steady while silently wondering how fate could be cruel enough to reunite two strangers under such impossible circumstances. By sunset, she entered Blackwood Manor, an enormous estate overlooking Lake Michigan where every hallway echoed with quiet perfection. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, priceless paintings lined the walls, and discreet security personnel watched every entrance without drawing attention to themselves. Damien personally showed her to a luxurious bedroom larger than her entire apartment above the bakery. Before she could mistake kindness for affection, he calmly opened the adjoining door leading to another suite. "That is my room," he said. "This marriage exists on paper before the board and before the public. Beyond those obligations, your independence will be respected, and I expect the same in return." His words were polite, but they carried the weight of unbreakable rules. Emma simply nodded, hiding the pain tightening inside her chest. She had imagined countless conversations with the father of her unborn child, but never one where he stood only a few feet away without recognizing her. As the days passed, Emma quietly adapted to life inside the mansion. She thanked every housekeeper by name, helped an elderly gardener rescue dying roses after a storm, and surprised the kitchen staff by waking before sunrise to bake fresh bread for everyone on the estate. Her warmth slowly transformed the atmosphere of the enormous house, earning smiles from employees who had spent years fearing silence more than mistakes. Damien noticed the change without understanding it. Every hallway felt brighter whenever she walked through it, and every room carried the comforting scent of cinnamon and vanilla after she baked. One evening he paused outside the kitchen, breathing in that familiar fragrance, while a forgotten memory stirred deep inside him. Somewhere, sometime before this impossible marriage, he had smelled that exact combination and felt something he had never been able to forget. The following week, Blackwood Manor settled into a routine that looked perfect from the outside, but felt dangerously fragile beneath the surface. Every morning, Damien left before sunrise to negotiate the billion-dollar Hartwell merger, while Emma remained inside the estate, pretending to embrace the quiet life of a billionaire's wife. In reality, every passing day became a battle against the secret growing beneath her heart. She slipped away for prenatal appointments, using one of the foundation's charity visits as an excuse, praying no one would question her frequent absences. Each ultrasound reminded her that the tiny heartbeat belonged to the same man who now slept only a hallway away, completely unaware he was already going to become a father. Inside Blackwood Tower, pressure mounted from every direction. Directors demanded faster progress on the merger, investors celebrated Damien's sudden marriage, and financial news channels praised Emma as the woman who had finally convinced Chicago's most untouchable billionaire to settle down. But not everyone believed the story. Victoria Sterling, the ambitious vice president who had expected to marry Damien herself one day, quietly ordered a private investigator to examine Emma's past. The report revealed nothing scandalous, only a modest bakery, volunteer work, and years of distance from her disgraced father. Yet one detail refused to leave Victoria's mind. Emma had visited Rush Women's Medical Center several times within the last 4 months. Victoria smiled coldly. Secrets always left footprints. That same afternoon, Emma escaped to the mansion's enormous kitchen, where kneading warm bread dough calmed the fear constantly twisting inside her chest. As flour dust floated through the golden sunlight, Damien unexpectedly walked in after canceling an overseas flight because of worsening weather. He stopped in the doorway without speaking. Emma's loose sweater gently stretched across her naturally curvy figure as she worked, humming softly while brushing flour from her cheek. The comforting aroma of vanilla, butter, and fresh cinnamon struck Damien like a forgotten dream. Suddenly, he remembered another woman hidden beneath a crimson mask, laughing quietly inside a luxury hotel suite while the exact same fragrance lingered in the air. The memory vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only frustration he couldn't explain. Before either of them could speak, Damien's executive assistant hurried into the kitchen carrying a stack of redirected personal mail mistakenly forwarded from Emma's former apartment. Most were ordinary bills until one sealed envelope slid onto the marble island. Across the front, printed in bold black letters, were the words Rush Maternal Fetal Medicine Department. Damien casually reached for it, while Emma's face drained of every trace of color. She knew exactly what was inside, and for the first time since becoming Mrs. Blackwood, she realized her carefully protected secret was only one heartbeat away from destroying everything. Emma lunged across the marble island, but Damien's hand reached the envelope first. The room fell into a suffocating silence as he unfolded the documents with the same calm precision he used when reviewing billion-dollar contracts. His eyes moved steadily across the medical report until they stopped on a single line. Obstetric ultrasound, 14 weeks gestation. Every muscle in his body became rigid. The warmth that had filled the kitchen only moments earlier vanished beneath an icy wave of disbelief. He slowly lowered the papers and lifted his eyes toward Emma. She stood frozen, one trembling hand instinctively covering her abdomen, as though shielding the child from the storm she knew was coming. Damien had faced hostile takeovers, corporate sabotage, and courtroom battles without losing control. Yet nothing had prepared him for the crushing realization that the woman he had married was carrying another man's baby, or so he believed. Without raising his voice, Damien dismissed every employee from the kitchen. The doors closed softly behind them, leaving only the two of them standing in the enormous room. His silence frightened Emma more than anger ever could. He walked toward her with measured steps until only the marble island separated them. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "Who is the father?" His words were calm, but the fury burning behind his dark eyes was impossible to hide. Emma shook her head, tears gathering despite every effort to remain strong. "Please, it's not what you think," Damien laughed once, a cold, empty sound that held no humor. "My board fought to approve this marriage. Investors trusted my judgment. I gave you my name, my protection, and my future company, while you carried another man's child beneath this roof." His hand struck the medical report against the countertop. "Tell me his name before I find him myself." Emma backed away until her shoulders touched the cabinets. Every instinct screamed at her to reveal the truth, yet terror chained the words inside her throat. If Damien believed she had deceived him, perhaps he would end the marriage. But if he discovered he was the father before she explained everything, would he take the baby away forever? She swallowed the fear and looked directly into his eyes. "I can't give you his name." Damien's expression darkened into something almost unrecognizable. "There isn't a place on earth where I cannot reach him." Emma closed her eyes for a single painful moment before whispering the words that shattered the silence between them. It began at the Venetian charity masquerade. Damien's heartbeat stopped. Memories buried beneath 4 months of frustration crashed violently into his mind, and for the first time since opening the envelope, uncertainty replaced rage. Damien stood perfectly still, his anger dissolving into stunned silence as the words echoed through the kitchen. The Venetian charity masquerade was not simply another glamorous event. It was the one night he had never managed to erase from his memory. For months, he had searched for the mysterious woman who disappeared before sunrise, leaving behind nothing except unanswered questions and a longing he refused to admit even to himself. He slowly lifted his eyes toward Emma, no longer seeing the reluctant wife forced into his life, but searching for the stranger hidden beneath a forgotten mask. "What happened that night?" he asked, his voice quieter than before. Emma's hands trembled as tears slipped down her cheeks. "You ordered an 18-year-old Macallan without looking at the menu. You told me I smelled like vanilla and warm bread. You had a scar beneath your left ribs, and you laughed when I said billionaires weren't supposed to smile." Every word struck Damien with frightening precision. No investigator, no employee, no stranger could possibly know those details. His breathing became uneven as memories returned with startling clarity. He remembered the crimson velvet gown embracing soft curves, the woman whose gentle laugh had cut through years of loneliness, and the promise he silently made to find her again. He had searched every guest list, questioned hotel management, reviewed security footage, and hired private investigators, but the masks had hidden her identity too well. All along, the woman he had desperately wanted to find had been standing beside him every day as his wife. His gaze slowly dropped toward the protective way Emma held her stomach. The impossible truth settled over him like thunder rolling across the sky. The child she carried was never another man's. It was his son or daughter. Emma expected another accusation, another demand, another cold order. Instead, Damien walked around the marble island until he stood directly before her. Without a single word, he slowly lowered himself onto one knee. His shaking hand hovered uncertainly before gently resting against her rounded abdomen. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Damien closed his eyes, overwhelmed by a guilt unlike anything he had ever known. "I accused you of betraying me," he whispered hoarsely. "I almost rejected my own child without knowing the truth." Emma broke into quiet sobs as months of fear finally poured out. Damien carefully wrapped both arms around her, holding her as though she might disappear again. At that exact moment, unnoticed by either of them, a tiny security camera hidden inside the kitchen chandelier transmitted every second of their emotional reunion to an unknown viewer watching from another location. The secret that had finally united their family had already become a weapon in someone else's hands. The atmosphere inside Blackwood Manor changed overnight. The cold mansion that had once echoed with silence now carried the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, soft laughter, and conversations that lasted long after sunset. Damien no longer buried himself inside endless meetings while leaving Emma alone. Instead, he rearranged his entire calendar, shocking executives by canceling overseas negotiations and delegating billion-dollar decisions to trusted directors. Every morning he joined Emma in the kitchen before dawn, clumsily measuring flour while she laughed at his complete lack of baking skills. For the first time in years, employees witnessed the feared billionaire smiling without calculation. Yet beneath that growing happiness, Damien quietly strengthened security around the estate. He trusted Emma with his heart, but he trusted no one else. The moment he learned he was going to become a father, protecting his family became more important than protecting his fortune. Emma slowly allowed herself to believe she was finally safe. Damien personally accompanied her to every prenatal appointment, ignoring the photographers who followed them outside the medical center. Instead of hiding her bakery behind legal paperwork, he secretly purchased the entire building and transferred ownership back to her under a new foundation, insisting she would never lose the dream she had built with her own hands. When she returned to work for the first time, neighborhood customers welcomed her with flowers while Damien stood quietly at the back of the shop wearing a simple coat instead of an expensive suit. Watching Emma smile among the people who genuinely loved her made him realize success meant nothing if there was no one waiting to celebrate it with him. Far away from the warmth of the bakery, another meeting unfolded inside a private office overlooking the Chicago River. Richard Collins nervously slid a confidential folder across a polished table toward billionaire investor Victor Langston, Damien's oldest business rival. Inside were internal merger schedules, executive security routes, encrypted financial projections, and confidential access codes stolen before Richard lost his position. Victor studied every page before smiling slowly. "So Blackwood's greatest weakness isn't his company anymore," he murmured. "It's his wife." Richard lowered his head in shame but accepted the payment transferred into his offshore account. He convinced himself it was the only way to rebuild his ruined life, never realizing Victor had no intention of honoring their agreement. That same evening, Damien's chief cybersecurity officer burst into his office carrying an emergency report. Someone had penetrated Blackwood Global's encrypted network using executive-level credentials that should have been impossible to obtain. Millions of confidential files had been copied within minutes before the intruder disappeared without leaving a trace. Damien's expression hardened as he scanned the report, but his blood ran cold when he noticed one stolen file highlighted in red. It wasn't merger documents or financial records. It was Emma's private medical file containing every detail about the unborn Blackwood heir. By sunrise, the attack had already begun. Financial news channels erupted with reports that Blackwood Global Holdings was facing an unexpected crisis as confidential merger documents appeared anonymously across business media. Within hours, investors panicked, the company's stock price dropped sharply, and television analysts questioned whether Damien Blackwood had lost control of his empire. Inside Blackwood Tower, emergency meetings stretched from one boardroom to another while directors demanded immediate answers. Damien remained outwardly composed, but every leaked document pointed toward an insider with unrestricted executive access. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Someone wasn't merely attacking his company, they were dismantling his future piece by piece. Emma watched the chaos unfold from Damien's private office, where every television displayed another headline questioning her husband's leadership. While waiting for him to finish a board meeting, she noticed a forgotten tablet glowing on a nearby conference table. A message flashed across the encrypted security system before disappearing seconds later. It contained only one sentence: "Target confirmed. The wife knows nothing. Move before the board vote." A chill raced through her body. Acting on instinct, she searched the recent communication logs and froze when she recognized one of the authorization codes. It belonged to her father. Richard had not disappeared after the wedding. He had been secretly feeding company intelligence to Victor Langston from the very beginning. Before Emma could warn Damien, the tablet screen suddenly went black, remotely erased by someone monitoring the system. She hurried toward the executive elevator, determined to reach Damien's boardroom, but the hallway outside had become strangely empty. The reception desk was unattended, security officers were missing, and the usual sounds of a busy corporate headquarters had vanished. As the elevator doors opened, two men wearing Blackwood security uniforms stepped out. At first glance they appeared ordinary, but Emma noticed one detail that made her heart stop. Neither man wore the silver Blackwood crest on his tie. One smiled politely. "Mrs. Blackwood, your husband asked us to escort you to the private garage." Before she could react, a cloth soaked with a powerful chemical covered her mouth. She struggled desperately, protecting her stomach as darkness closed around her. When Damien emerged from the boardroom 20 minutes later, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Emma was gone. His chief of security rushed toward him, his face drained of color, holding a single black envelope discovered on Damien's desk moments earlier. Inside was a photograph of Emma unconscious inside an unfamiliar warehouse, her hands bound but carefully positioned over her pregnant belly. Beneath the photograph lay a handwritten note in elegant silver ink. "Attend tonight's merger vote and save your company, or come after your wife and lose everything you have ever built. You cannot have both." Damien crushed the black envelope in his fist as the board of directors waited inside the conference room for the most important vote in Blackwood Global's history. Billions of dollars, thousands of employees, and years of relentless work depended on the merger scheduled to begin in less than 15 minutes. Every advisor urged him to stay. They promised the security division would recover Emma while he protected the company. Damien looked through the glass wall toward the boardroom, then quietly removed the chairman's identification badge from his suit jacket and placed it on the conference table. "A business can be rebuilt," he said without hesitation. "My family cannot." Before anyone could stop him, he walked away from the merger that had defined his career. For the first time in his life, Damien Blackwood chose love over power. Using encrypted GPS data hidden inside the engagement ring he had given Emma on their wedding day, Damien and his elite executive security team tracked the signal to an abandoned steel manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Chicago. The massive warehouse stood silent beneath a violent thunderstorm, its shattered windows glowing with scattered security lights. Inside, Emma remained tied to a steel support beam, while Victor Langston calmly explained his plan. Once Damien arrived, the company would collapse without its leader, investors would panic, and Victor would acquire Blackwood Global for a fraction of its true value. Emma listened in silence until another familiar face entered the warehouse. Richard Collins stepped forward, unable to meet his daughter's tear-filled eyes. He whispered that he never intended for anyone to get hurt, but Emma saw the truth written across his broken face. His greed had finally destroyed everything he once claimed to protect. Gunfire shattered the silence as Damien's security team stormed the building. Smoke grenades rolled across the concrete floor while alarms echoed through the empty factory. Victor's private mercenaries opened fire, turning the warehouse into chaos. Damien ignored every bullet striking nearby steel beams as he fought his way toward Emma. Just as one armed attacker raised his weapon toward her, Richard threw himself into the line of fire, taking the bullet meant for his daughter. Collapsed to the floor, using his final strength to hand Damien a flash drive containing every record of Victor's corporate crimes. "Protect her," Richard whispered painfully. "Don't let my mistakes become her future." Seconds later, Victor attempted to escape through a rear loading dock, but Damien tackled him before he reached the waiting helicopter. As police sirens surrounded the building, Damien rushed back to Emma, cutting the ropes with trembling hands before pulling her tightly into his arms. Through quiet tears, she rested his hand against her stomach, and together they felt the baby's first unmistakable kick, reminding them both that even after betrayal, fear, and sacrifice, hope had survived. 6 months later, the morning sun poured through the windows of the newly restored Sweet Haven Bakery, where laughter had replaced fear and fresh bread once again filled the air. Emma stood behind the counter, her newborn son sleeping peacefully in her arms, while familiar customers admired the tiny boy, whose arrival had quietly transformed one of America's most powerful businessmen. Blackwood Global Holdings had recovered stronger than ever after Victor Langston's arrest. The flash drive Richard surrendered before his death exposed years of corporate fraud, bribery, market manipulation, and financial sabotage, sending Victor and his closest associates to prison. The board publicly apologized for doubting Damien's leadership and unanimously approved the international merger he had nearly sacrificed. Yet Damien rarely spoke about profits anymore. Every evening, regardless of meetings or headlines, he returned home before sunset because there was one investment he refused to neglect: his family. Although Richard's betrayal had nearly destroyed their lives, Emma chose forgiveness over bitterness. She attended her father's quiet funeral with Damien standing beside her, not because Richard deserved redemption for his choices, but because hatred would never heal the future she wanted for her son. Afterward, Damien revealed one final surprise. Months before the masquerade where they unknowingly met, he had anonymously invested in Sweet Haven Bakery through one of his charitable foundations after reading about Emma's program that donated free bread to struggling families every weekend. He had admired the owner's compassion long before he ever saw her face. Neither of them realized fate had begun weaving their lives together long before that unforgettable night behind their masks. Hearing the truth left Emma speechless, as she realized their story had never been built on coincidence alone. On the anniversary of their unexpected wedding, Damien invited Emma back to the same luxury ballroom where the charity masquerade had changed both of their lives forever. This time there were no disguises, no hidden names, and no painful secrets waiting between them. Soft music filled the elegant hall as he led her onto the dance floor beneath thousands of sparkling lights. Halfway through the dance, Damien stopped, reached into his pocket, and removed the original marriage contract that had once reduced their relationship to nothing more than a business transaction. Without saying a word, he slowly tore every page into small pieces and let them fall like snow across the polished floor. Then he knelt before her, holding not another contract but a simple wedding band engraved with 4 words, "My choice, my forever." With tears shining in her eyes, Emma accepted his proposal as friends, employees, and loved ones applauded around them. Years later, visitors entering Sweet Haven Bakery would often notice framed photographs covering one quiet corner of the cafe. They showed a frightened baker, a lonely billionaire, a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket, and a family whose smiles grew brighter with every passing year. Customers knew the bakery because its bread was unforgettable, but those who learned the story behind its owners discovered something even more meaningful. A woman once treated as collateral had become an equal partner in both love and business. A man who believed every problem could be solved with contracts learned that trust could never be purchased. Their greatest success was never measured by company shares, billion-dollar mergers, or worldwide recognition. It was measured by the little boy laughing between them every morning, proving that the strongest families are not built through power or wealth, but through forgiveness, sacrifice, and a love courageous enough to survive every impossible beginning. The end.